Would intelligent agencies think we live in a matrix controlled by an artificial intelligence? Sometimes, fact-based reporting leads into a very strange territory. In my case, a forensic investigation into who controlled the financial system turned into a very deep rabbit hole indeed. It led me to meet with very senior intelligence agency and secret society sources who explain the concept of humanity being struck in a matrix created by an advanced artificial intelligence of unknown origin. Furthermore, they say this AI may well be evil or possibly insane. Now, with the global situation seeming increasingly bizarre and irrational, and with the financial system imploding, it's time to look at the evidence for these propositions. That is because, if it is true, then the only way to liberate humanity will be to defeat this rogue AI. The first time I was told about the AI theory was when I met a Grand Master of the Gnostic Illuminati. He went by the name of Alexander Romanov and was recruited by the former World Trust champion Bobby Fischer. Romanov was sent to see me in order to initiate contact between the Illuminati and Asian secret societies. He told me the Illuminati was formed by the Greek mathematicians Pythagoras in response to the destructions of Atlantis. They say Atlantis was a civilization in the central Mediterranean Ocean, probably the Minoan civilization, that was destroyed by a volcanic eruption and a tsunami around 1600 BC. The ancient Greek Illuminati believed that whatever entity caused so much destruction was evil and needed to be overthrown. In other words, they believed the suffering and misery of this world would only be end with its creator was overthrown it. This is crazy sounding stuff. The Romanov did warn us in advance of the plans to trigger a nuclear and a tsunami terror attack against Japan on March 11, 2011. This attack was forensically traced by NSA, Japanese military intelligence, and others to the Khazarian Mafia, specifically people like former Jesus Secretary General Peter Hans Kovensbach and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Khazarian Mafia, in turn, claims to take orders from some sort of identity they consider to be God. The next person to talk about a rogue artificial intelligence being in charge of the planet was a man by the name of Paul Lane, who was from the Pentagon's Man Who Stare at Goats Physics Warfare Division. Lane, together with a very senior Silicon Valley oligarch, whose identity I will keep secret in order to protect him, say the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency had also come to the conclusion we were dealing with some sort of AI. They noted that something was preventing humanity from leaving the Earth and that all space explosion had been stopped since the 1970s. Lane said the NASA stood for not a space agency. Yet another source to confirm this conclusion was one of the last surviving members of the Majestic 12 group, set up by former President Harry Truman to study UFOs and other unexplained phenomena. This source also say MG12 had concluded that all UFO-related incidents ultimately trace themselves to an AI. The reason for bringing this up now is that the NASA officials also contact us to say that recently some sort of anomaly has been changing. In their words, the very fabric of reality. That has something to do with the continuing but ultra top secret activities going on in Antarctica. Japanese military intelligence sources say this is all somehow connected to the so-called ongoing coronavirus epidemic. They sent an expedition to Antarctica earlier this year which uncovered direct evidence of some sort of joint US-Chinese top secret operation on Antarctica. The Japanese expeditions was prevented from landing at the base ostensibly because of the coronavirus. However, they were able to take the following photograph of a Chinese vessel located near NASA M. Mudo research stations in Antarctica. The festival clearly shows some hard technology, they report. The Japanese were also able to show some video evidence of scholarly technology and NASA activity in the background of a base video shown to them by a crew member who had worked on the base. This crew member refused to talk about the work being done at the base. This directly approach to the coronavirus by the cable and their failed attempts to vaccinate us all are clear signs they are losing control of the planet, the Japanese sources say. In this context, it is important to remember the strange electronic anomaly that killed 170 people in Mecca in 2015. This was followed by another 4.173 people killed in Mecca a few weeks later. After this, the Saudi asked the Russian for help. The Russians sent a special naval expeditions, headed by Russian Orthodox Church Patriarch Kirill, to transport something, supposedly to Ark of Gabriel, to Antakya. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with the coronavirus and the financial system? Well, for one thing, Mecca has now been completely shut off from the world that most of its inhabitants supposedly have the coronavirus. The problem is that if you visit any hospital, you can confirm for yourself the coronavirus does not exist. Something else is going on. What about the financial system? First of all, at its very root, the financial system is a process of deciding what we as a species do in the future. Many years, decades of research, starting as a junior reporter working at the Bank of Japan Press Club in the mid-1980s, led me to the conclusion that the financial system is controlled by the very top in the West by monotheism. This monotheism think of themselves as good shepherds, but that still make a shepherd living in an animal farm. Art Kazarian Henry Kissinger once said, "The court has since been erased from the internet. In the future, it will be as impossible for the average person to rebel against us as it is for the sheep to rebel against a farmer." When we visited the P2, now P3 Freemasons in Italy in 1929, they told us they controlled the monotheism except for the rebel Muslim faction. They also said they took orders from an entity living at the heart of the galaxy that communicate with them via gamma rays. This is strange stuff, but they did tell us in advance they were going to fire Pope Benedict XVI as well as Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi that they did when the Japanese decided to rebel in 1929 by stopping payment of tribute to the monotheist hierarchy. They were punished with the Fukushima attack of March 11, 2011, as the Gnostic Illuminati predicted. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When the Chinese decided on February 16, 2020, to start paying tribute to the United States of America Corporation, not the Republic of the United States, the city of Wuhan was hit by some sort of electromagnetic attack that may have killed as many as 20 million people, according to the CIA. And yet, the Chinese, unlike the Japanese, did not respond to the attack on Wuhan by bowing down and surrender like the Japanese. Instead, they bounced right back and kept moving forward. After that, the world, especially the West, was put under the de facto martial law, allegedly in response to a coronavirus. However, if you actually visit the hospital, you can see for yourself this so-called COVID-19 does not exist. So what NASA described as some sort of anomaly affecting the very fabric of reality appears to be a loss of control by this so-called AI. The AI may well be the multi-generational entity that resides in the collective brains of human beings who have been inducted into secret societies. This is what is fighting to remain in control with the so-called pandemic. And yet, for some reason, they have lost the ability to kill us in large numbers. You can be sure they wanted a real pandemic to kill most of us off, but it failed to happen. Now, as the mass genocide failed to happen, more and more people are disobeying orders to stay under lockdown. This means more and more people are escaping the matrix. So what would it mean if this ancient group of families who claim to take orders from an overworldly entity lose power? If humans gain control of the financial system, then the entire story that our planet has been running under the world change. Just thinking back to the post-war period, the story has been a Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West. Then, it was a never-ending war on so-called terror. Now, it is a fight against a so-called pandemic or else a war against China. The common theme is fear and conflict, divide and rule. If humans took over control of the process of deciding their own future, there are a few no-brainer things they would do. One is there would be a huge campaign to end death and disease. None of us, or most of us anyway, wanted to get old and die. Why then is research into immortality actively repress it? Instead, immortality and eternal youth should be the main focus of much of our research. Some people say, but then we would run out of the space. So the other thing is we would all want is to make this planet a better place by increasing the amount of living space and the total amount of life. Ideally, we can start colonizing the universe. That would allow for the eventually possibility of trillions of humans on millions of planets. There is plenty of room for countless numbers of immortal humans in the universe. If we cannot colonize the universe, we can start turning the deserts and Arctic regions green and filling them with life. We can create underground habitats and use the removed Earth for land reclamations. We can also start improving our genes, making ourselves smarter, stronger, faster. Genetic technology now at our disposal means some human could decide to evolve. Some might modify themselves to be aquatic so that humans could colonize the oceans while respecting and enhancing the existing sea life. Others could grow wings and be able to fly. The overall effect of humans rebelling against their Khazarian overlords and deciding their own destinies would be akin to the Cambrian explosion. Before the Cambrian explosion, life on Earth for billions of years could only be seen under a microscope. The most you could see with the naked eye was brown sludge. Then suddenly living creatures became literally trillions of times bigger. It is time to do this again. That process of planetary liberation is what the controlled of the ancient system are fighting and failing to stop. This is a change to the very fabric of reality the old controllers are desperately fighting to prevent. The key is to take away their control of the financial system. That is what they're fighting for, and the trophy is close at hand. If we take their control away, most of the people reading this report will have the opportunity to live thousands of years, if not longer. The last centers that need to be taken are Rome, Washington, D.C., Basel, Switzerland, and Tel Aviv, Israel.